Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a lifetime of passion for public television, we are pleased to help underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES TV.
Hello, Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, a regular session of the legislature opens next week, just in time to possibly consider a veto from the recent special session on redistricting. We'll take a look. We'll also examine a new strategy for promoting Louisiana's global trade and Entergy dealing with possible rate hikes and a bird in the power grid. Those stories, plus an update on the airport, including access road construction. And even with Mardi Gras over, there are still parades and rules to follow. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Anthony McAuley, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Tyler Bridges, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. We'll go over to Tony to get us going, and let's talk about Entergy. I mean, you know, the storms caused a lot of problems and damage, and Entergy is looking at how to pay for that, pay for repair, and it's probably going to go to the ratepayer.
Certainly going to the ratepayer, that's for sure. Yeah, they were in the, they made national news this week for a bird knocking out power in New Orleans to 10,000 people. And that was in the New York Times. I think that was indicative, that and all the other social media trashing of Entergy over an incident like that, indicative of what a punching bag the utility has become. What it stems from really is the fact that over the last 2 years we've had the pandemic and we've had record storms in the state. And Entergy has come out, you know, looking really well. They've had 2 record years of profits. Their chief executive has given himself a $4 million a year pay rise to $17 million a year last year. And the shareholders have done very well. They've got $1.5 billion over the last couple of years as the dividends have increased. And so that's had a lot of people asking, you know, well, what risk does this monopoly utility bear when incidents like these happen? So what's happened in the last couple of weeks is that they've got approval from the Louisiana Public Sector Commission to pass on the cost of the storms, which are going to be $4 billion, north of $4 billion by the end of this year. And that'll mean something of the order of around $20 on the average ratepayer's bill. For Louisiana, and then for New Orleans, there's a lower amount, but a similar consequence that bills will be going up to cover this for the next 15 years. That will pay off bonds over 15 years to pay for just the storms of the last couple of seasons. And
so that's a surcharge to pay off for the damages that need to be repaired because of the storms. And is that $20 monthly?
Yep, every
increase?
Month for 15 years to pay off, on average. There's different math that Entergy does, but just the plain, straightforward average. Just for by the way, that's just for the first $3.2 billion that's been formally approved. There's another billion at least to come for Louisiana ratepayers, Entergy Louisiana ratepayers, that is. So the average person will be seeing on their bill $20-something. But I mean, you know, you can imagine if someone has a fairly large home, let's say, they're lucky enough to have a large home, and they also own a business, they'll be paying surcharges on both of those things. So, you know, a business owner with a house could be looking at $100 a month extra for the next 15 years.
Now, the New Orleans City Council, and they regulate Entergy New Orleans, they haven't been too happy with Entergy, and they've shown their displeasure over these past months. Entergy is going to go to them for $120 million. Is that the amount that they want?
Sorry, it's $200 million. The number's moved. It's been a movable figure, but the latest is the latest estimate that they had in their official filing. Entergy's official corporate filing said $200 million. So we're looking at, I mean, you know, for New Orleans, Entergy New Orleans customers, it's going to be less than the Entergy Louisiana ones. It's still going to be several bucks a month, you know.
And so this is, you know, following, you know, Ida, which really did a lot of damage, and as you said, the other storms in the previous year, 2020, particularly in southwest Louisiana, really caused a lot of damage too. But, you know, people have been upset about the fact that they were out of power for so long, about a bird flying into, you know, infrastructure, and people lose power for how many hours in New Orleans. You know, ratepayers have been upset. They're paying a lot already, and they didn't have this service for a prolonged amount of time. What recourse do ratepayers have?
Well, that's. I mean, let me just say, by the way, that the you know, ratepayers are upset about the blackouts that we had, the consequences of the storms, the money they're now going to have to pay, which is kind of like. It's like not having insurance, basically. That's what the consequences are for ratepayers. But the bird issue this past week, which, you know, in the scheme of things was relatively minor, but it affected the central business district. So who's mad about that? And we're going to go on to talk about trade later. But the people in the city and the region who are trying to attract businesses here, those are serious sorts of setbacks for them when there's national press coverage of the fact that our infrastructure doesn't work properly, or even just the impression that that's the case.
Is there any kind of way that the ratepayer can get some sort of relief from these repairs that have to be made coming from some other source, like federal money?
Yeah, there was talk of that. Commissioner Skermetta on the PSC had suggested that he had been in touch with the Secretary of HUD about releasing federal money there, but they actually got in touch with us, the newspaper, to say no, he hadn't, and they were not inclined to lift the restriction on using that money for a private sector company to make repairs. That's what they specifically said. So there may be other federal money, and it'll be really something that the governor will have to determine. He would have to ask HUD, for example, and then HUD would have to decide whether or not to do it, and they don't seem inclined to do it. But there are other federal monies that they could earmark to try to relieve ratepayers by paying to repair this company's infrastructure. But that's a political question.
Okay.
Tony, have you seen any figures about how our rates compare with a typical American city of around the same size?
Well, the issue with that is it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, because it's one of those things that you'll hear is that we have amongst the lowest, I think it's the second lowest unit rate costs in the country. But then people wonder, well, why is my bill amongst the highest, average highest in the whole country? You know, apart from the Northeast. Where they have, you know, they have higher charges for various reasons. Obviously, the weather is one. And our sort of household bills are high because of the weather as well. But it's also because of things like the fact that our housing stock is relatively old and inefficient for energy. But also the margins that the utility companies get. That is something that has to be looked at as well. They're relatively high margins on those low rate, individual rate costs.
Okay, all right, Tony.
That's why we
Thanks
pay high bills. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tony. Let's go on over to Tyler right now. Legislative session, regular session coming up soon. We finished the redistricting special session. What are we going to be seeing?
Yeah, so legislators convene on Monday for the regular session. It lasts 90 days. As you mentioned at the top, one of the issues is going to be left over from the redistricting special session from February, because the governor chose to veto the remap of the congressional map. That's the map for the 6 House seats in Washington. The governor chose to allow become law the map drawn for the State House and the State Senate for the next 10 years, and also the map for the Public Service Commission and BESI, the Education Board. But so legislators are, when they're in the regular session, they're going to have to decide whether to try to override the governor of his veto of the map, again, of the congressional delegation. The governor wants a map that has 2 black majority seats. He says the state has 1/3 of the state's residents are black, so commensurate with that should be having 2 black majority congressional seats. Republicans don't want that, because if that were to happen, Representative Julia Letlow, who represents Northeast Louisiana, will lose her seat. So that'll be one of the issues coming up during the regular session, again, that convenes on Monday.
All right, and some other legislation can be submitted also if they don't override the veto. Can other legislation regarding this congressional district be submitted as well?
Yeah,
be considered?
Yeah, they could try to draw new lines, but I don't think the vote would be any different. It depends, you know, if the Republican-controlled legislature simply wants to draw a new map with a few changes, but it's still it's 5 Republicans and 1 Democrat. Well, I think the governor would veto that as well.
Yeah, okay. All right, so other business that is before the legislature in the regular session now. Yeah,
the big thing is that the legislature has an unprecedented of what's called one-time money. It's $3.4 billion, and that's about 10 times the normal amount. And that is money that would normally be spent on roads, bridges, water systems. So the governor and the legislature have got a lot of money to spend, and this is money that has come down from Washington, not the infrastructure package. That hasn't even come to the state yet, but a measure that President Biden and the Democrats in Congress passed last year. Plus, the legislature and the governor, they've been very conservative in their budgeting last year and their budgeting practices. And also the economy has produced higher tax revenue than expected. So they're sitting on, again, $3.4 billion to spend this year. And everybody's saying, look, we should not use that money for annual spending because it's just one time. And everybody seems to be in agreement on that. Now, there'll be differences on how to divvy up that large amount of money. The governor says the #1 priority for the state is taking $500 million of the $3.4 billion to set aside for a new bridge that would be south of I-10 in Baton Rouge going over the Mississippi River. And that would only be a down payment on the overall cost for the bridge and the connecting roadways of maybe $2 billion. And Republicans are questioning whether that's a good use of that money. Another priority of the governor, and this would be for the annual spending portion of the budget, would be to give teachers a $1,500 pay raise. He's been trying to get teachers to what's called the Southern Regional Average. So what he's basically trying to do, to put it in simple language, is imagine that teacher pay raise was like football in the SEC. So the goal would be is to basically get the LSU to be a team in the middle of the pack of the SEC. That's what the state of Louisiana is trying to do, or the governor's trying to do with teacher pay. Not be #1, just in the middle of the pack. And again, Republicans are questioning whether there's enough money for that as well.
Early childhood ed has been a big thing that the governor has wanted.
Right, and there's another $50 million for that. Everybody seems to say that more money for early childhood education is very important. A lot of the teachers earn basically poverty-level wages. But again, Republicans are questioning whether the money is there in the future years for money that would be committed this year.
And once again, this is not the infrastructure bill money that Congress passed last year. We'll be getting more from that, will we not?
Yes. Again, $3.4 billion of one-time money. Some of that money will be set aside for, some money is being set aside to pay down debt. Some of the money is going into the rainy day fund, but they've got oodles and oodles of money for projects. And this is where governors traditionally have been very, very powerful, because ultimately the governor decides whether which projects are funded or not through the line item veto. So governors previously in this situation, which doesn't come along very often, have exercised enormous power. But Marcia, as you know, the Republicans who now control the legislature have frequently been at odds with this Democratic governor. And so we will have various fights on social issues. The governor told me on Wednesday he's concerned that there'll be various divisive social issues like critical race theory, and things like that could divide the legislature when he wants everyone to come together and spend this money for what he says would be the best way for Louisiana.
Session begins Monday?
It begins Monday. I'll be there.
All righty. We'll be looking for you. Thanks a lot, Tyler. Okay, Dawn, over to you. Our new airport, how's it doing, and what about access to it?
It's doing very well, actually. Just anecdotally, I was in there on Ash Wednesday and the following Sunday, and it was very busy but very efficient. people seemed happy. My son actually commented when we flew back from Washington Reagan Airport how much nicer our airport is than their airport. We were voted the best large airport in the country by J.D. Power and Associates last fall. The airport, however, when it was opened in May of 2019, we all probably remember, had very limited access to it. The construction project was still underway at Loyola to get the lanes shifted right. Now, if you drive out that way, you see the big bridges up in the air, the flyovers. They're not connected yet. They aren't supposed to be complete until sometime in 2023, so it's getting much closer. It was 4 years out. It is a really unique project. It's a $126.6 million project to build those 2 flyover ramps that will provide direct connection between the airport and the interstate. And Loyola Drive out there in that part of Kenner will become the first, I've got to get this right, diverging diamond intersection in the state of Louisiana. I encourage anybody who's watching to Google search diverging diamond intersections and watch educational YouTube videos on what they really mean, because my description will only go so far. Basically allows 2 directions of traffic to cross over one another and then cross back over one another, and it makes it easier to get onto highways, and it prevents the need for a 3rd flyover ramp. So it actually saves the state taxpayers $60 million in construction costs, because the airport will only need 2 flyovers instead of 3 flyovers. If you watch the videos, it looks really confusing at first. We're told it will be very well marked, it will be very well signed, you will know which way you're going, but it will feel weird the first couple of times you're going across the wrong way in traffic. You'll be flowing in the left lanes, other people will be flowing in the right lanes opposing you. So it will feel different, but it is supposed to work. The lead contractor on this project is Gilchrist Construction out of Alexandria, Louisiana, so it is all state, local money, staying local. They have had delays just like everybody else. There were COVID delays, and then there also were some significant IDA delays to this project because the big trucks removing debris from the project ended up going off to do storm debris. So it's bump it back to on schedule. There also have been construction cost increases, supply chain issues, but it's looking like 2023 you'll get to go on those diverging diamond intersections and see what it's like, and actually have much easier access to the airport with less traffic.
Yeah, what you're describing right now does sound a little challenging, you know?
Yeah, watch the video. The other thing at the airport is there are more flights happening all the time. Breeze Airways announced just this last week a new direct nonstop to Jacksonville. Breeze is the airport's newest airline, the nation's newest airline. It started last summer. There are now 9 nonstops that Breeze services from New Orleans, so business is picking up, and the American consumer seems to want to fly again. Although you might want to book soon, because as gas prices go up, so will ticket prices.
Right.
And Dawn, I hope those divergent lanes don't have bike lanes on them too.
They don't. They don't. That would be. I think that might be too much for all of us.
And so our new airport got your son's seal of approval, it sounds
did.
like. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, thanks a lot, Don. E, let's go on over to you. Some new rules for parades, but this is regarding Second Line, right?
Well, you know, with Mardi Gras over, people might assume that parades are over. but March is really one of the richest months of the year in terms of parades and activities. And these, as opposed to the big Mardi Gras parades, are more of like cultural type parades. You know, you got the St. Patrick's Parade and the St. Joseph's parades. And then you have some black neighborhood cultural parades like the Mardi Gras Indians. The Mardi Gras Indians traditionally have a second life around St. Joseph's Day. There was a real interaction in some of the early neighborhoods between the Sicilians and blacks, and they became very interested in St. Joseph's Day. So it used to be St. Joseph's Day was the day for the Mardi Gras Indians to come out. And then throughout the year, especially in the spring into the summer, you have the second lines. These are more spontaneous groups of people just going out and parading and have a band. All of them are wonderful in terms of the things we like about New Orleans and want to see. All of them are a bit of a pain in the neck for City Hall, and especially in this year when we're having the manpower shortage, especially the second line parades. All the others are sort of like organized groups, and there's more of like somebody in charge and a form you fill out, whereas the second line parades are a lot more spontaneous, and they're a little bit more difficult to control. And the city has been trying to put a control on the number of people that that march in them, even though they admit that they've been pretty loose in terms of their enforcement. But now they're saying this year we got to do it because we really are short on police, and we have a serious problem. And at the same time, the city is trying to work out some kind of a bonus structure to give police. So as we come into this period, and I think this weekend and for the next, actually into the summer, we're going to be having these things. We're going to be having this it's an ongoing issue. And of course, anytime you raise it, you get these issues. You know, this is part of our culture. You're denying us from, from celebrating our culture. There was that famous episode when Chief Tootie Montana went before the city council and complained about too much regulation and had a heart attack before city council. And that became a scene in Treme in the movie. And so it's sort of like a famous situation that we have, but it's a spillover about the whole police shortage problem we've had. And so, I mean, will their routes be shortened a lot generally, or what are they being told? What do they have to do? I think they're being kind of vague about it. I don't think the question is the route as much as the numbers. And so they're trying to cut down the numbers. And apparently, over the years, some of the groups have evolved having other things in them, like vendors participating in different things, and like mini floats. And they're trying to adjust that and make it more of just an honest march of the second liners. And so what are the second liners saying about this? They don't like it. Responding? Not happy, huh? Yeah, they don't like it, and you can see why. I mean, they say this is part of our culture. I mean, it's part of our traditions, and certainly a healthy thing they have out there. And so they object to it. And they're also, apparently a lot of this information came about at the last minute. That was the same situation that one of the Mardi Gras crews, Chewbacca, said. On the week of their parade, they were told they'd have to cut down their route. And you can see the city is trying to figure out all this stuff as it goes along. So the combination of having to do it and not getting much prior information before having to do it has caused a problem, too. Okay, all right, E, thanks a lot. All right, Tony, back on over to you to wrap us up. And we've seen a merger of two nonprofit organizations that really focus on economic development in this area. Yes, it's actually the takeover of the World Trade Center by G&O Inc. And the World Trade Center was it was actually a brand that was founded here in New Orleans. There's 300 of them around the world now, and it's a pretty sort of famous brand. It grew out of a couple of organizations here after the war when trade was really booming. And it reached its sort of apex when that building at the foot of Canal Street went up, which became known as the World Trade Center or International Trade Mart previously. But the kind of the fact that that's now 4 seasons and that the World Trade Center here as an organization was just a couple people operating out of one canal place was sort of symbolic of the fact that we've declined over the years as a trade city. And G&O Inc.'s which is the Regional Economic Development Agency, the official booster of economic activity in the greater New Orleans region. Its job is to promote trade and bringing companies here. The fact that it's taking it over is a sign of what needs to be done now on that aspect of boosting the economy. That is to say, their first priority really is to get the port investment that has been long clamored for here and is currently quite contentious about building a new container port in St. Bernard Parish at Violet. That's one of the main priorities, as well as getting more favorable policies towards trade, including infrastructure investment, agreed at the state level. And then the other thing that they want to use the World Trade Center within their organization now to do is to really heighten the international connections they have. Trade is all about kind of relationships and glad handing and navigating bureaucracies for your exports from Louisiana and to get people to locate here so that they can import through New Orleans to that third of America that are really well served by the river connections and the rail connections, particularly, that we have here in the city. You know, when the World Trade Center, originally known as the International Trade Mart, first opened, there used to be several consul generals from different countries out here, full-time career consul generals, Mexico and France and England. Gradually, that number diminished. I don't know if there are any consul generals now, but instead, what the countries do is they have an honorary consul general who might be some local attorney in the business. And so the decline from consul generals to honorary consul generals tells you a little bit what the situation is. And one answer they gave is after the Cold War, as more countries formed, you had more countries to deal with. And so that took a little bit off. But in that sense, we're not the trade center we are either in terms of the international representation we used to have.
Right. You know, our biggest source of imports, Russia, which is in the news, and their consul person is based in Houston, and I think that's kind of, you know, Houston made this move, by the way, to take the their World Trade Center inside their regional development office, as well as the Chamber of Commerce, 33 years ago. So I think you know, that's something that people mention as that we're just a little slow to move around here, both in terms of our port investments and other things like that, you know, and that's how we've lost a lot of companies to Houston and consul general.
Houston's another good example because England at one time had a very active consul's office here, and the same thing happened. They condensed it and moved the consul general to Houston.
So World Trade Center now absorbed by GNO Inc. Basically, that's what has occurred, Tony?
Yes,
Okey-doke.
that's right.
All right, we wish them luck for economic growth. Okay, guys, other stories. E, start with you.
Okay, well, there are three great carnivals in the world: New Orleans, Rio, and Venice. All of them were affected over the last few years by COVID. Venice was shut down for 2 years. Well, we know what happened in New Orleans. Rio didn't make it out of the gate this year. That they decided early that they were going to cancel or at least postpone. So they're having their carnival April 20th through 30th. Which is going to make it like the week after Easter. So it's going to be the first time that Mardi Gras follows Easter rather than the prelude. Okay. But at least we did better than Rio.
All righty. Tyler, over to you.
Yeah, thinking ahead, Jazz Fest, I always bought my tickets for Jazz Fest at the Smoothie King Center, the windows there. But Keith Spira, the music writer for my newspaper, says you can't buy them there anymore, and you can't go to the Jazz Heritage Building either on Rampart Street. So the only way you can get Jazz Fest tickets, I'm told, is online.
Okay, well, those who want to go to Jazz Fest will definitely find the tickets, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, Jazz Fest tickets in advance.
Okay, all right. Don.
Errol talked already about the St. Patrick's Day and St. Joseph's Day parades being back for the first time in 3 years. So more signs of life in the city, especially coming up April 2nd and 4th for the NCAA Men's Final Four.
Yes.
Lots of national eyes on our city.
Indeed. Thanks a lot, Don. Tony?
I'm looking at a West Bank development called River Street Ventures, which was blocked by the previous city council, and it's being sold out of bankruptcy. So what the new city council does with that will say a lot about what their attitude is to those kinds of big housing developments.
Okay, we will see. Thanks so much, guys, for being here, and thank you all for joining us, too. We will see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a lifetime of passion for public television, we are pleased to help underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES TV.